For those of you who are not in government, how many of you are touch government from a contracting vendor kind of standpoint? So several others, okay. So we're going to touch on a bunch of things. We're going to talk about internally within an agency, within a city or state, what's happening to create greater transparency, allowing procurement managers and buyers to have access to information that will help them do their jobs better. We're going to talk about ways in which we can increase the vendor pool so that a broader range of vendors are able to contract more easily with government. And we'll talk a little bit about the RFP process and some interesting sort of framing around RFPs that may be more helpful and adaptive. Because we're a relatively small group, I'd love to go around, and you can clearly pass, but I'd love to hear in a word or a phrase, not a paragraph or a litany, in a word or a phrase, if you could wave a magic wand and say, this part of the procurement process is in most desperate need for improvement or efficiency, what would that be? And as specifically as you can. So as you think about the broad range of activities associated with government purchasing, what would you think is the one area that if we could just make it more efficient, we'd drive a lot of better buying on the part of government? Feel free to pass, but it just wanted to kind of get a sense of your collective beliefs. And you, I know, are passionate about this.
Oh no.
So put you on the spot.
It's so hard to be concise.
Yeah.
Paper.
I'm assuming the elimination of? The elimination of?
I mean, 9 copies, bound and take out, send in the
Great.
mail. Just people don't want to apply hassle.
Awesome.
Paper and hassle.
Okay. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
names too.
What's that?
Do your names too? Like, is it introductions or just words?
Oh, feel free to.
Salt Lake County. Senior
Awesome.
advisor to the mayor.
Thank you. Okay.
Job Steering, Space Society, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. For me, it seems as if procurement could go for much smaller amounts, if you have like a max for contracts for 200,000 euros or whatever, that would automatically solve a lot of problems.
Okay. Where there's less friction in the process.
And you don't have so many, you can't create so many problems.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm not in procurement at all, but I work for a foundation, and we're interested in how procurement could make it easier for institutions to buy products that are better for your health and not harmful to your health.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I'm Sarah, I'm a user experience strategist at Excel, and I would say the emphasis on meeting specs versus thinking through the question at hand.
Vince Bernetti, City of New York. I would say just red tape, odd kind of weird things that different procurement processes have that make you have to have the vendors jump through hurdles.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
I'm Federica, I'm the program director at Civic, and I kind of echo what she said about having preset requirements instead of an open call for innovation for a specific problem. And also the lack of iteration capability. Get to answer one that's
Just clarification, lack of iteration capability.
well, you can do, it can be a process of communication between wants and needs and possible solutions. And
Got
so
it.
you get one chance to answer to something, and then you have to pick a winner at once.
Got it.
Whereas if you wanted, you got all the offers, and you were able to figure out what you needed better, and then go through a second iteration of that. That might solve a lot of problems, save a lot of time.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
I came in a little late.
Just if you could wave a wand and take one aspect of the procurement process and create efficiency, what aspect do you think drives the greatest inefficiency?
Okay.
And again, in a word or a phrase.
All right, so my name is Akezia Grisby from Jersey City. We launched a brigade 2.5 years ago, and from there we developed, I'm just giving you a background real quick.
Okay.
We developed an organization. It got funding from Google. Jersey City does not have a CIT, CTO person, anyone who's leading technology. So we find ourselves leading the proposal process, but there's no funding, there's no person to help make it go through. There's a lot of problems that we've addressed that's overlapping through various departments. So in terms of procurement process, we don't know how to really advocate for that because we're kind of leading that charge.
Okay. So it's both an advocacy and accountability. Okay. Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Baker, CIO for the City of San Diego, and what I see is the just really modernizing the city charter and municipal code to take advantage of some of the new technologies in procurement. Today we have, following the process, we have startups look at our RFPs and go, wow, I don't think I can fill out that 120 pages of document. How can we automate that? How can we streamline it?
Streamlining the process.
Make it more efficient.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And we're going to talk a little bit about that on the panel.
Brand new procurement.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I'm Sean Long, I'm the founder and managing partner for a small network engineering services organization in San Diego. We mainly focus on the U.S. Navy, so parallel DoD procurement, responding to the procurement action. There's a lot to bring up, but for us, the biggest challenge right now is I'm not sure how many people here are familiar with. We're dealing with a lowest price technically acceptable environment, and it's just multiple award, and then LPTA is just horrendous.
Okay, thank you.
Nicholas from the City of Newark, I'm a business development officer. We created a business license application at a cost of $17,000 with a retail of $120,000. There was 3 parts to this: accountability, concept viability, in the sense of the people who are deciding on which contract to choose. Sometimes they choose the lower end contract because it's the cost effective, but sometimes it's not the most effective. I would say the Rfp process, because it's so outdated, and sometimes in the City of New York where we do a lot of paper and print processes, and the tech is being a new vision. It's kind of hard to give someone who's been at City Council for 20, 30 years, our 8 council members average over 120 years on City Council. So how do you bring new vision to a system that is outdated and old?
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you.
Councilor, I'm City of Daly City.
Great. Thank you.
Michelle Tong, City of San Jose, Office of Economic Development. As someone who's usually outside of the procurement process, I'd say a process that is closed. You have to be, one of the major decision makers who's already in the loop as an internal customer to get to have a say on the spec. And if you're not an existing customer, you have to
Okay, cool. Thank you. Laura. Hey.
Laura, my name is City of Pittsburgh. 2015 is the year of procurement in the City of Pittsburgh. And we were lucky enough to have Cook America Fellows this year help us build locations. One of the main things that I think we found was that there was so much confusion about the procurement process. Both on the part of business owners and departments trying to figure out what is the appropriate procurement mechanism to use on any particular project, how they can best take advantage of what the rules are as they are, as well as on the vendor side. So that was
Great. Thank you, Laura.
Hi, Michael Grass. I'm the executive editor of a new publication from Atlantic Media that covers state, county, municipal government operations, innovation, and academic procurement. So, one observation that I've seen just traveling around the country is being able to help smaller and medium-sized jurisdictions that don't have the know-how and be able to standardize their processes and be able to have those jurisdictions be able to join together on a common system.
Good. Yeah, we'll talk a bit about that as well.
Carlos Moreno, I'm the co-captain of the Tulsa Brigade. I guess my phrase would be openness to open source.
Openness to open source. Cool. Thank you, Carlos.
My name is Tara Sam. I'm here from St. Louis, representing a couple of projects, but from the startup side, applying to RFPs, I'm interested in the transparency around the criteria and what kind of criteria can have better economic impact for local companies to provide services.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Connor Peterson with SACOG. I would say a database of proposals and specifications of some sort, potentially between contracting.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's good to meet you too.
Jason from the city of Long Beach. I would argue that my point would be to talk about the requisition process and educating the requester as to what they want so that we can get it.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll pass.
Okay.
Joe Cotter from Wyandotte County, Kansas, and the County Administrator's Office. I would add to the San Diego CIO's comments about regulation, but from a way to encourage more businesses to actually want to do business with local government.
Yep. Great. Thank you. Well, you guys who came in late. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Erica Brown with the Warren John Arnold Foundation. Interested in learning how to move government away from defining solutions and requirements towards paying for solutions and outcomes.
Great. So for those of you who came in late, we're just trying to, in a phrase or a word, identify what you think is a part of the procurement process that is ripe for leveraging data and technology to make it more efficient. If you had to pick one, even though we know there are multiple.
Yeah, my name is Lawrence Berdesca, formerly at City County of San Francisco, and also at Cella. Right now, I have a startup called Civic Makers, and we're really interested in how government agencies find information about how tools work and the research phase of preparing RFPs and technology assessment and procurement.
Okay, great.
Hey, I'm Zach Bird from Execute. The big point that we have in the procurement process is around transparency in the post-award period. So we found that the contracting process is very slow. It's hard as a small services business to staff around unpredictability. So understanding how long it takes, when we're going to be able to get started on the work and plan around that would be really helpful for us.
Okay, great.
I'm Ryan Rundle with Romulus, which is Seneca Systems. It's a constituent relationship management service built for local governments. So I'm interested to hear the challenges that local governments have in the procurement process and how we can help them do that.
Hi, my name is Jerry Hall. I have a civic business called Civic Archive, and we archive local government agendas, minutes, and support documents, and make a searchable library that and channel the content. And I'm also a co-captain of the San Diego Brigade. And I'm really interested in streamlining the procurement process of it. Also, declaring, tracking, and publishing outcomes and making that available to the public. Because I really believe that that's really what we're after is the outcomes. And I think if the public were able to start seeing the outcomes and seeing the results, and they would be a little more involved in it and striving towards the end goal.
Yep, and that'll be a theme I think you'll hear from most everyone, the notion of transparency, right?
Ryan Redsborough with Trailhead Labs. We develop an outdoor technology platform for government agencies. And I guess my one, I don't know if it's a question or comment, but just a point of discussion is I recently got partnered with a company that is on a call list, sort of a short list for a government agency. And I was just sort of curious, that seems like a lot of piggybacking, and it seems like that's another strategy for sort of skirting the more involved and complicated procurement process. So just getting on short lists and the process for that would be something I'd love to hear a little bit more about.
Okay. Great.
I'm Jim Van Fleet. I'm a co-captain of the Charlotte, North Carolina Brigade, among other things.
The City Council of Charlotte passed a policy some time ago that they want to make it easier for small companies in Charlotte to do business with government, and I want to know what to tell them.
Okay. Great. Ron.
Ron Whitting, founder of the GovTech Fund. We invest in company startups. I just echo the comments by my neighbor. So sort of requirements and solutions and how that process often starts with needing to build something custom. So we'll do that.
Okay. Great. Thank you. We were just identifying the one thing that if we could solve it for procurement, we'd go a long way in making the process more effective, a word or a phrase.
Oh, that's okay. I'll just trust that you're.
Yes. Okay. And passing was an option. Okay, good. Thank you. Did you? Yep. Okay. Thanks. It's really helpful. You know, the themes. I wrote these down, and you know, as I think about them, there are themes of process complexity. There's themes of transparency. There's themes of accountability and reward. What are we rewarding people who are purchasing on the part of government for? And so these are all really rich things. And you know, my name is Bob Softman, and I had been with Code for America for 4 years, running Code for America programs, having the honor of being the interim executive director when Jen was at the White House, and worked with this company, Smart Procure, who was in our accelerator company. And when I left Code for America, I'm now with Smart Procure. Ron funds the organization. It's one of the companies in this GovTech fund. But I say that only because from my vantage point, there are a lot of really interesting things that are happening in this space. And our goal is for these folks to highlight what some of those are. It's not comprehensive, it's not complete. It doesn't represent the end-to-end procurement process yet, but I feel like we are creating some critical mass. You know, there's an awareness now that things are bad, but there are solutions that are starting to emerge that are giving people confidence that they can get better. And so if we're successful here, we want to help bring that confidence to the service and identify some specific examples. So we have 5 folks, and I've organized a set of questions for these guys that we'll go through, and then we'd love to open it up to the group. So Adam Becker, who is the founder and CTO of the Department of Better Technology. And he was actually in one of the first PIF, Presidential Innovation Fellow classes out of the White House, the federal government, and he was working on procurement. And you might have heard of RFP EZ, but he was working on that. And so welcome. And Juan Vasquez, who is, I think, celebrating his first month with the city of Los Angeles in the mayor's office of innovation, of operations innovation. They've targeted 3 areas to focus on, and procurement is one of them. And Shelley Nye, who is a 2015 fellow who has been working with Laura, actually, in Pittsburgh on procurement and has built some really interesting applications, she and the fellowship team. Sam Cohen, who is a colleague of mine from Smart Procure, who heads up government relations. And Ashley Myers, who many of you know as a former Code for America staff person who is now spending a year in San Francisco in an innovation fellow role and also focusing on procurement. So great. So let me just ask a couple of questions. And I think they address a lot of sort of the general themes that we were hearing. But the first is about the degree to which buyers and managers within a municipality has access to data to allow them to do their jobs more effectively. And we know that there is a general lack of transparency and data availability, or if it exists, it's really hard to pull out of legacy systems. And so Sam and Shelley, maybe you can talk about the things that you're working on and the things that you've seen that give a greater level of transparency to people inside government.
Well, thank you all for your responses. And I want to apologize to you specifically. I was a former contracting officer with the Air Force, and I ran some LPTAs, so I really apologize. I know how bad it is for the vendor, so I feel for you. But one thing, Bob asked about transparency, and several of you mentioned transparency. At least at the Air Force, and it's similar with other agencies, there's almost no communication, that almost everything is siloed. So I was at Hanscom Air Force Base outside of Boston working in one small program office. We're working with some of the big defense contractors. We have no idea what the people a floor below us or in the building across the street are doing. And they're part of the Air Force too. They're just buying for a different program. So one thing that would have helped was being able to easily access that data and know, okay, they just bought this, I'm buying a similar communications device. There's only so many radios that can go in planes. So you bought a radio device, I'm buying a radio device, can we piggyback something off that? Can I borrow something from your RFP? Something like that. So that was at the buyer level, which was my level. Then the chief of contracting for the base wants to know what's going on, in total. So he wants to know how much is being spent with certain agencies, how much is being spent locally, how much is being spent with women-owned, veteran-owned, and so on. So there's all that data that's out there that's not being captured right now. We actually spoke to one city in the Midwest, and he said that the head of procurement said they gather their data once a year, they send it off to a third party, they wait 6 months, and they get a report back. And if they wanted something else in that report, they have to do it again. And it costs them thousands of dollars. So one thing at Smart Procure, like Bob has said, I'm also the AV guy here, so. So this is a new tool that we're building. So this is just for one agency. So this is a mock-up for City of San Francisco for 2014. And we can see very quickly some key data points. So we see their total spend, we see their top vendors, we see it by threshold, and so on. And one thing that we found in our data, I'm just going to talk about paper for 1 second. We had one person mention paper over here. So the City of San Francisco spent about $500,000 worth of paper in 2014. They did so from 27 vendors, and the top to bottom difference in per ream pricing was 60 cents. So they had no idea that they were buying from this many vendors or at varied pricing. So we can show them that in seconds, and then they can take that data and say, okay, I want to negotiate, down. I want to only have 3 vendors. I want to take those top people and, get quantity discounts and so on. So with that, siloed data from the police department and fire department and public works and so on, we're able to aggregate that and make it useful for the decision makers in the mayor's office.
Great, thank you, sir.
Hi, everyone. So speaking of paper, before we joined the fellowship and were parachuted into the city of Pittsburgh, the very first thing we learned was we talked to a departmental purchaser in the IT department. And she told us that there was no easy way to look up where to buy things from. So if I worked in the city of Pittsburgh and I wanted to buy paper, I didn't actually know where I could buy it from that was on contract and available to buy in bulk. There was a spreadsheet that some people had access to with ambiguous information on it, and if I was lucky enough to have a contract that had the word paper in the title, or a vendor that was called Paper Company, I could find it in the spreadsheet. Otherwise, I would be out of luck. So one of the things we built is Scout, that Bob's going to pull up. And Scout is a searchable database, so I can type in what I'm looking for, maybe even the name of a company, maybe the number for the contract if I know it, and find information about it that I need to make the purchase. And unlocking information is one thing. Another thing we did was try to improve communication between departments. That's super important. There's a subscribe button, and by pushing that button, people can get updates about the contract. So no longer were people trying to still buy off of expired contracts. One of the problems with this inaccessible spreadsheet is that once, I, as a city staff person, found the paper contract, I would write it down on a Post-it by my desk. But, Post-its don't update. So a year later, I would be trying to buy that paper and find out that the contract no longer existed. So with Scout, hopefully that won't happen again. The next thing is Conductor, which underlies Scout. It's another application. The city of Pittsburgh has about 500 contracts in its inventory at any given time. And the thing about contracts is that they expire. And the process to get a new contract in place spans many months, many agencies, many people. It's about 10 to 20 steps. And the city of Pittsburgh only has 2 purchasing agents. So it's these 2 people's job to manage 500 contracts that are going through a 20-step process. And they were using a single spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are powerful tools, but sometimes they don't work for a job as big as that. So what you're looking at, Conductor, is a much easier way to keep track of where is this contract in this process, who do I need to get in touch with. We moved all of the data off of these spreadsheets that I mentioned into Conductor. So once someone renews a contract completely and it is no longer expired, that information updates in Scout for all of the city staff who are following it.
That's great. Thank you. Sam, do you want to play your AV role and click the logo button? What's interesting about both of these examples is that in both cases, the data exists, right? In the one case, it's in spreadsheets, and for Sam and Smart Procure, it's in the form of purchase order records. These guys built Scout and Conductor in a matter of months. Taking existing data, pulled it into a frame in a matter of months. Smart Procure has, in a matter of months, put together an application that pulls in purchase order data and renders it as dynamically as the data gets updated. And so this level of visibility is so powerful. The degree of difficulty is not significant. It's not as significant as other solutions that look a little bit more traditional.
So in a couple months, or now turns into a year, doing something that could have been 3 months. So how did you kind of focus on that?
Sure. So at Smart Procure, we take the historical purchase orders from the government agencies. So I forgot who mentioned it, but somebody mentioned it, that there's a issue, I think it was you, there's an issue with the contract award, then something happens, and then 6 months later, you finally find out what the end result is. We take that end result. So we don't worry about everything before that. We take the concrete history of the purchase order, and then we aggregate that and then make it searchable. So for San Francisco or for any agency, we would take in any format. The police may have an Excel sheet that they can give us their information. The fire may have a PDF and so on. We can take that in any format, and we have a proprietary software that can just take all that, and within a matter, I think it's 24 to 48 hours from the time that we get it when it's live on the site. So for us, it's very simple to do so. But you're right. We've spoken to government agencies. We bid on a big RFP that their implementation process was 18 months. And when we told them that we can do it, the second we get your data, we need about a week to clean it all up, and then put it on the site. We could do that, and they were shocked. They never heard something like that before.
I think
that's really.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. We don't know yet.
Let's one more question, and then we'll have time for questions at the end as well.
For us at Smart Procure, we actually partner with BitSync, and we're partnered with a lot of the big RFP companies. But we can take the data in really any format and then put it into the system. We don't take paper because that just takes way too long for us. But we upload about, I think right now we're about 3 million POs to the system every single week. So we can do it pretty quickly. And we have over 250 million POs in our system.
Okay, good. Thank you, guys. Let's shift focus a little bit and talk a little bit about vendors. And particularly in this crowd, we can appreciate that the broader choice in vendors is a good thing, but the process oftentimes gets in the way and discourages specifically smaller vendors to be able to go through the contracting process. And so Juan is doing some really interesting work in LA, first to characterize What is that experience like for a vendor wanting to do business with LA? And so was going to ask him to just very briefly describe some of the top line findings of what it feels like to be a vendor in LA. And then we'll look to Shelley and Adam to talk about ways in which they're finding a process to be streamlined or opportunity to streamline the process.
Sure. We're finding that it takes a lot of time and resources and effort to become really good at it. So it makes it for businesses that want to be agile and that are already serving other verticals that we as a city would want to do business with them. It takes a long time for them to even be able to bring us into their verticals. A lot of this is due to ordinances that build on themselves over the years that requires vendors to fill out all these forms. But these forms are really just time and time again, what's your address, what's your email, what's your name, how many people work for you. So one of the things that we're doing is we've identified about 17 through 25 forms that might need to be filled out at any given time to do business with the city. How can we synthesize that down to 5 online actual fields that the system can kind of track regardless of what place in the bidding process the vendor might be at. And that's so important for women-owned, minority-owned, disabled, veteran-owned businesses. We as a city have now looked at our numbers, and they're not anywhere close to where they should be for the type of diverse city that LA is, and much more where the national standard is at. So just understanding where we can streamline and where we can make it easy, but really just making it so that people want to do business with the city. That's an area that we're excited to explore. And really requires a lot of attention and dedication from all partners. So we're working with academic partners, tech partners, to help us bring in the expertise from the professionals in the field.
And your experience in LA, I think, is pretty common across agencies and municipalities. And so, Shelley and Alan, what are you seeing as ways to create a little bit more seamless and easy process for vendors to be competitive in contracts with government?
Sure. One other, is this on? I'm actually not sure. Can you all hear me? Okay. So one of the other first things we did when we got to Pittsburgh was help out at the Small Business Resource Fair, and this was on a Wednesday night after work hours, and we met like. Is it on now? All right. We talked with over 20 businesses that had traveled downtown to come get really simple questions answered, like what are the contracts that they could currently apply for? How could they apply for them? And they came all the way downtown after hours on a weekday because that wasn't accessible online. And one of the things we did was just make that information super accessible. Stood up a website, put basic information about how to apply on that website, put all of the opportunities currently available for businesses on the site, Beacon, which someone could pull up back here. And more importantly than that, allowed people to subscribe for a mailing list to get free email notifications about current opportunities. When we piloted this with one RFP early on in our fellowship, we got 16 times more proposals than in previous RFPs. And that was simply being very proactive about information, making it easy for people to get to, putting it up earlier than usual, allowing people to sign up for reminders, and responding quickly to questions.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I want to pick out. So if I remember the question correctly, we're talking about how to get new vendors in, right? Because the competition is really one of the things that's just sorely needed. I want to pick out one thing that you said, Juan, where it's not, you're talking about all of the clauses and ordinances, but then you said, we want to get that number down, but we want to put them in an online form. I really would pick out that part of making things, it's not just a matter of having all of these terrible clauses and ordinances. It's the problem of, they're all in a .doc or a PDF. And I love ragging just as much as the next guy on the fact that you have to certify that your apps are like Y2K ready in order to contract for the federal government, and that for LA you have to certify that you're not making any money off of like slave labor, a clause from the 19th century, which was great intentions when it was made, right? So I'm happy to sign all those, right? It's just a matter of actually it's really just the tech behind it or the lack of tech behind it. I don't like being a techno solutionist, but when it comes to business registration for procurement, this is one of those things. And if you go to the federal level, I know most of y'all are from the local governments, but as we've kind of established, the problems are very similar. And at the federal level, there's this system called sam.gov, which is it's a new system, believe it or not. It's the consolidated way that businesses are now supposed to register to contract with the federal government. And if you look at the data they've published, you can see it's very clearly just completely locked new businesses out of contracting for the federal government. It is, I worked as a presidential innovation fellow, as Bob said. As we were there, we did a kind of a screencast of the example of, here's what a user experience is if they are trying to register through sam.gov. And we couldn't finish it. We got to like the 90th screen and we ran into an error that we couldn't solve. We couldn't finish it. We had to come back and do it later. And now, as running my company, we're dealing with the same problems. And we've really effectively locked new businesses out. And that's, one of the reasons I'd say that, Shelley, you're talking about posting those RFPs online and getting more responses. That's what I did with RFP Easy. There's a slide, but it doesn't matter. It distracts from my point. The reason that those are so successful is that they have actually circumvented that business registration process that right now is just this humongous barrier to entry that needs to be torn down if we really are serious about getting new vendors into the space.
Great, thank you. And Ashley.
Thanks. So my work at the mayor's office has focused primarily on buying technology and tech-related services, but I think a lot of the lessons we're learning are more broadly applicable. So one insight I think related to what you guys are talking about is that there's this sense in government that our contracts are like these precious special things and everybody wants them. We have to put up these barriers and make it really hard to get them. And like whoever can cross those barriers is like the knight who won the princess or something. But they don't actually want our contracts, guys. Like that's not true, at least around technology. There's a perception that government is a pain and that they're gonna fail anyway because they're so hard to work with. And they're often like so big, so much money, and so long and of such huge scale that a lot of firms can't even bid on them. Like they're too big for them to tackle. So the only firms that can take them are firms like big generalist, big IT firms. So some of the ways that I think we're dealing with that, and it really is kind of building on RFP Easy and is it Scout that Beacon that tells about them, is you have to put up a marketing campaign for your RFPs. Like you need a blog post that really tells a compelling story about why this project is meaningful and important and high profile. Like you need to have an industry event or a reception with senior leadership in your city courting new companies who have never considered responding to a government proposal before. This is a lot of what Ron does in his work, is really convincing the private sector that the government market is as powerful and lucrative and important as it is. And I think individual cities almost have to kind of like sell themselves as customers. The city of San Francisco did a program last year called Startups in Residence, where we invited startups to spend 4 months embedded in city government building a prototype product. And it was for free. Like they weren't paid anything. It was all about the access to learn about their customer in a way they're not actually able to. And we got over 300 people who applied, which is way beyond how many people normally respond to RFPs or RFIs at the city. So there's interest there, but that was a different way of publicizing the opportunity, a different way of talking about why this is valuable, actually making the case for why you would want to come spend 4 months working with government. And I think that cities need to think about making the same case for their RFPs and their solicitations rather than just like publishing the PDF on some arcane website. And then I think the second thing, I know we're going to talk about a little bit about RFPs and RFIs in a later question, I believe, and someone mentioned this, is modular contracting. So going to that problem of them being so big, a lot of small, especially in technology, like small web development or web design firms, they can't bid on your like $25 million 5-year huge project. Like that is beyond what their staff is able to do. It's beyond the scope of their skill sets. Like you're asking for too many areas of expertise in one contract. And so you end up getting only these massive entrenched government vendors who don't specialize in any one thing, but just have a lot of people or a lot of subcontractors and can say that they can do all of your requirements. And so that's sort of a buyer education issue, but how do we teach buyers to break their projects up into smaller pieces so that smaller local companies can actually bid on those pieces?
Is that a little bit of a plug for your session this afternoon?
Sure, yeah. If you want to dig much deeper on tech procurement, and especially custom development, we're going to talk more about it at 4:30.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Two other things that are happening that are really interesting. The state of California, the IT department of the state of California, is in the process of relaxing rules for contracting with companies that operate in the cloud. And so they're recognizing a need to streamline a process and institutionalizing it. The other thing that I found really interesting, many of you know of AT&F at the federal level, but AT&F has created, and Adam, you can keep me honest about this, but they're creating a blanket purchase order agreement to work with a set of vendors at the federal level. And the way they vetted the vendors that would appear on this list was gave them a 2-week task. They gave them some, contraindicated drug information, and gave them an application they had to build within 2 weeks as a way of saying, and then evaluated the application, as a way of saying there are certain characteristics of companies that are not making it into government in an easy way that this kind of 2-week assignment can weed out, and so they're creating a blanket purchase order agreement for those sort of companies. So from a process standpoint, I think people are starting to implement interesting things that will help it be easier for vendors to be competitive, particularly the smaller, newer, startup-oriented vendors that do things like operate in the cloud and have agile development processes. Thank you. So in the interest of time, I wanted to talk quickly about, we talked about internal transparency and how data isn't always available to people within government to do their jobs effectively. I think that same level of lack of transparency in the marketplace allows some unhealthy things to go on, which is, for example, prices for the very same product offered sometimes by the very same vendor to be offered to different governments at wildly different prices. And it's that lack of transparency around marketplace pricing that makes it hard to negotiate with vendors, makes it hard to see if you're getting the best price or find the vendors who are offering best price. And so Sam and Adam, if you could talk a little bit about how this pricing transparency in the marketplace is really helping create more efficient purchasing.
Sure. So one thing that we found through our data at Smart Procure is very often the same agency buys the same product, maybe a computer monitor or a desk chair or something like that, and they pay different prices, which is crazy. Now look at across the 89,000 government agencies we have in the U.S. and look at how many different prices we pay for the same thing. So, Bob, if you can go to my slide. What you'll see up here in a second, this is a HP Laserjet printer. It's the printer that we have in our office. So there's absolutely nothing special about this printer. If you've ever seen our office, it's low budget printer. But if you look at this graph, we can see the disparity of prices that people are paying for the same exact printer. This is a model number search. So what we can do through a very simple search, just like you would search in Google, type in that model number, you can see all the different prices that the different agencies have paid, and then you can choose to buy from the vendor that sells at the best price. If you can see it very clearly, why would you go for a more expensive vendor? Or if I'm going to be working with CDW government or Dell or something like that, and you can just look at their data and see, okay, CDWG is selling this printer at 10 different prices. So I'm just going to tell them, hey, I know City of San Francisco bought it at $250. That's the price I want. It's very simple. It's almost so simple it's crazy. But we're seeing that this data is out there, but nobody's using it.
But does economies of scale get into?
Yeah, so we can, if you saw the entire system, you can see it by quantity. So we show the quantity that's on there. We can show dates as well. So we can exclude stuff, from 2 years ago, because obviously the printer was more expensive then. But we can show on the same date, the same vendor sells to different agencies at different prices.
One other question?
So maybe just a clarification, and I don't want to take this down a rabbit hole this too, but so I work with oceans, fishers, fishermen, docks, ports, buyers, and sellers. This type of information, how much you pay for a service, we're being told is illegal. That the government cannot tell you how much they paid for a service. It's illegal for them to disclose it, and that if you're a third party, like a harbor master or whatever, they're not allowed to tell you either. So there's no way to comparison shop that it is in fact in the contract with the city or state or federal agency that you can't disclose vendor pricing. And I've heard that actually from some vendors, that they require that because they don't want to be undercut on cost. So I can see that within an agency or within a city, you could share that information. But I just sort of like to talk a little bit about that, especially in very small markets where you're trying to work to make the case to a business that they should even enter it, to say you could make X amount of money. I'm coming up with a little hypothetical, so I'm just kind of curious how you get around this confidentiality piece to make these fixes happen.
So from our experience, it's public information. So what they paid. Now, if there's something that's proprietary, if there's something that is military classified, something like that, it doesn't show up in our system. But for commodities, general services, things of that nature, that's absolutely public information, and anybody can see that.
There's a lot of nuance to the question, and so I'd love to continue this after if you want to stick around for a second, because I think it's something that actually, well, so I was just going to go on to the nuance, so I'll stop myself, censor myself. And Ashley, I think you had a comment about this as well, or maybe not.
We should bring the San Francisco data in to show City San Francisco.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Sam had mentioned a little bit of what we found in San Francisco. Okay, just in the interest of time, LA is doing some really interesting work in reverse auctions. I don't know how many of your municipalities have been working in reverse auctions, but it's having some really interesting impacts. So we asked him just to describe reverse auctions quickly to us as well.
Sure. I'll preface this by saying that this tactic complements tactics oriented around value and solutions. So we only employ reverse auctions for commodities. And what we find, I wrote some notes down. We've done them via our general service department. Over the last 8 or so years, we've done about 44. They've generated a good amount of savings. And as you can see there's a company, one of you guys, you can write it down if you want, E-Auction Services, Inc. And just, bidders are anonymous, and basically the bid will be awarded to the lowest bidder. Again, this is for commodities, and it complements a conversation around value and solutions, but it increases the number of suppliers that are bidding, generates a lot of cost savings for the city, and it takes the same amount of time as if you were just to do traditional kind of bidding process. So we have, the goal is to do 12 more over this fiscal year, and again, commodities. So it's just this really just shows what you would see in the same amount of time. It just allows for cost saving and more supplier diversity. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it like blew open the amount of people that were participating in our bids. It's a proprietary, it's easy, E-Auction Services, Inc. So they just have their own software and they rock it. Cool.
Great. Thank you. And then the last question, and then we'll open it up to comments or questions from you guys, is to Adam, and it's about the RFP process itself. And with RFP Easy, you touched a lot of parts of the process. And it'd be interesting to kind of hear a couple of your insights about recommendations in terms of both the frame around RFPs and to the extent that solutions exist. How do we create an environment where cities and states don't have to reinvent an RFP each time they're really trying to secure a similar type of service or product?
Sure, thank you. That gets at a couple of points. So for background, RFP Easy was a project I worked on as a Presidential Innovation Fellow. Started about 3 years ago now, and I was only a fellow for 6 months or so. So it was a really fast project. We put about 5 professional services, kind of web design RFPs through a new online system that circumvented a lot of what I talked about earlier with all of those registration onerous requirements, and made it easy for the small business community, the web design community, the kind of startups that you see here at the summit, to actually to discover these RFPs and then bid on them as well. And in that short amount of time, in that 6 months, we were able to actually prove that those 5 RFPs, we got on average a 30% reduction in the cost of the bids that were coming through. So major cost savings, and a few hundred new businesses had registered through RFP Easy. Basically, our new simplified registration process had gotten 300 new businesses in the door. So there's kind of two parts of this. One, I think your question, Bob, was talking a little bit about how we avoid reinventing the wheel each time we issue an RFP or an RFI or an RFQ or any RF for that matter. So I think that, and it also gets into the Sam, your point about price comparison and having making sure you have an accurate frame for what kind of prices you should be paying before you actually start to go out and select a vendor. And the point there is that research and talking to your peers is one of the most important things you can do. One of the biggest problems we heard, RFP, the first, same as Code for America Fellowship, the first thing you do when you come in as a fellow, kind of like jet-packed in, the first thing you want to do is go and interview a ton of folks, right? And the thing that we heard consistently throughout our interviews with folks inside government was that actually the process of writing an RFP or writing, it was mostly focused on statements of work, was just this incredibly painful one where they would often be cobbled together from, if your friend has a statement of work that's kind of similar, you grab a paragraph there, you grab a clause there, maybe you don't know anyone who's done it and you kind of just guess at what you should put in there, or maybe grab something from a vendor's, capabilities document or something like that. While that represents a true pain point, that actually is the right road to go on. You want to be, talking to folks who have done similar things. You want to find what worked for them, what didn't work. If I'm, in the city of Oakland and I'm doing a website redesign, and the city of San Francisco just redesigned their website, I got to go have a meeting with them and figure out, all right, what worked, what didn't, and especially if it's, between governments, I think those conversations can usually be pretty frank too, to all right, that vendor wasn't so good, right? And let's, figure out what parts of the document we can tweak to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I guess doing some good scouting, if it as it were, is really important there. And I guess the second point I'd want to make when talking about RFPs, and a lot of folks in the audience have already mentioned the solutions and framing things around objectives rather than a checklist of requirements. The one thing that I've kind of gathered an appreciation for as I've been going through the RFP process as a vendor, as a small business now, is that what you're really launching is a partnership, right? What you really want is a good partnership between you and one of these firms that you're selecting. And that really, you need to think about the foundation that you're building that on. And the way that you're framing your statement of work and your RFP, but also the method in which you're putting that out to vendors. If you're throwing your RFP out in a Word document and asking for 9 paper copies, as you mentioned, you're automatically kind of selecting, not only are you selecting a set of vendors who's willing to put up with that, but even if you've got like those great vendors, the folks who are at the tech fair down the hall, and even if they're willing to put up with that, you've already kind of set out the footing for this partnership. You're kind of setting out on a sour note, right? You're telling them, hey, we're going to be a major hassle to deal with, and the unfortunate part, and I'll be 100% truthful here, is that they're going to raise their prices, right? If we're responding to an RFP and they want a USB drive with our proposal, that either directly or indirectly is going to raise the price on our proposal, because it indicates to us that, all right, we're going to need to go through, even if we get this, we're going to have to go through security meetings, we're going to have to go through, sign all of the clauses, register in the system that takes me 90 steps to register in. Two things there, and I also realize that as folks, even if you're in one of the higher positions in government, it's not like you have the ability to wave a magic wand and change all of this. But the important thing, I guess, is to change what you can, and then especially if there's parts about the process that are really ugly, and they're going to be ugly, and you don't have it in your power to change them, which it's impossible to do sometimes, to just really be upfront with that with your vendors. I think building that goodwill will go such a long way towards having a good relationship with a vendor, and having a lasting product and building something really great.
Great, thank you. I know it's inappropriate for moderators to have a point of view, but if you'll indulge me, one of the things that I get excited about when I hear these kinds of applications happening is that, in my experience, people associated with government buying are more often rewarded for following the process than for effective outcomes. The negative consequences for not following the process are far more stringent than any kind of positive reinforcement for driving results. That's probably said more strongly than it exists, but it's a principle that, and so what data has the ability to do is to shine a light on actual results performance, particularly if you bring in that benchmarking side of the equation to say, how am I performing relative to my peers? That can change the equation. And I do believe that as we focus on results, the end result, getting the best price, the best vendor, the best solution, as that becomes a priority, as that gets measured, then that's probably a faster way to change process than going after the process in general. And so we'll see if that turns out to be the case. But the promise of technology and data and transparency, both highlighting the efficacy of a process and how it does or doesn't affect results, I think is really exciting and will help bring about change. So thank you, panel, for sharing your points of view. Much appreciated. We have a couple of minutes left, and so we'd like to open it up to questions, and there is one in the back.
I'm excited to ask this, but I'm not sure if this is already happening, but wouldn't it make sense to get more consistent outcomes and more consistent best practice data for cities and municipalities and counties to specify the desired outcome and let the vendors come and tell them how they're going to achieve that, and let the vendors build their reputation on that, and so that other cities and counties can start, instead of that statement of he who writes the spec gets the check, instead of that broken system, how about the county write the desired outcomes and let the vendors come in and show them how they can deliver.
Did you want to, I know that was something that Adam has a really strong point of view on.
Sure. Yes, that's one of the most majorly important things. Yes. Writing those RFPs in terms of the objectives that you want to achieve, rather than the specific specs or the specific ways to go about achieving them, and that gets into the point that I was just making too, with having a good partnership with a vendor is probably you need to recognize that vendor has probably done this before, right? The thing that you're actually something that should be really valuable when working with an outside vendor is that they've actually worked on very similar things with other government agencies and probably have a lot of experience they can bring to the table. So being able to kind of say, take a step back and say, all right, I might not know what the best solution is, but here's what we want to achieve. Here's probably a lot of unique insight we can bring, and have that partnership to figure out what the best solution is.
Just real quickly to dovetail on that, the data would have to be published so that other vendors can see what their competition achieved, and they could help beat that goal next year. So if the problem is that the closed loop system, procurement's great at procuring, at a big old machine like this, but innovators can come in and just change things much more quickly.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
So we talk a lot about commodity and just product versus services. Has there been a focus or an emphasis on how to do service acquisition better instead of just products or hardware, or just a commodity?
There you go.
That's what I've been working on. It is specifically around new custom products like web design and development. So this is where the sort of specs and scope really comes into play, I think. We have been trying to encourage buyers of the city to move from a model of waterfall where they write all the specs ahead of time to an agile model where they really work with the partner. I think that it kind of actually is related to the previous question, and I think that we have to really honor the expertise of the government buyer. To ask them to just state their desired outcomes and then the vendor comes up with a solution, I think that wouldn't resonate well with a lot of government buyers. They're like, I know what this part of what the solution should be. I don't want you to just come propose it. I've helped shape it by writing the specs. The process isn't working, but there is a real value there. They are subject matter experts, they are policy experts. And so I think a better way to talk about it probably is that you will state your desired outcomes and you will look for a certain set of skills and expertise and experience in your vendor. And then together as partners, you will come up with the solution. So it's not state your outcome, they give you a bunch of solutions and you pick one. It's more we'll work together. And I mean, that's for custom new development. Obviously with SaaS models, it's a little different, or off-the-shelf models, but I think you really have to honor the fact that the people in the department do know their needs and they do know the policy area. And so they want to be part of developing the solution. And right now they think that they are entirely the ones developing it when they write the specs. The other thing I would say is that there's kind of a vicious cycle. A lot of government buyers have really been burned badly by government vendor relationships that have gone south in the past, and so they react to that by writing even stricter specs next time. And their statement of work is now 80 pages long instead of 40. And so you have these people who are kind of bruised, and it's a lot to ask of them to say, like, don't write a spec at all. Just say what you want to achieve and get a firm that you trust and work with them. Like, they kind of look at you like you're crazy. So.
I can add to that if I have 30
Actually,
seconds.
I think we're at time, but you guys can stay around. I would love to continue the conversation, but thank you for participating and thank you guys for being on the panel.